All right. We didn't even address. It's just you and me tonight.
Oh, yeah.
We have no
That.
halfway through the episode. We didn't even explain that John's not here.
I should probably cut
John,
this part more towards the beginning of the episode.
maybe this will be the beginning of the episode. John was he was murdered. He was murdered, and his spooky ghost is haunting us.
Murder
right? Spooky ghost
has taken place.
Right, spooky ghost John?
Ooh, yeah.
I was just going to edit in his voice saying something.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know if I was supposed to be John.
From like a previous episode, just edit in him giggling or
I don't know. I feel like I could pull off spooky John. Ooh, you guys.
How's it going in the afterlife, spooky John?
I don't know. It's all right, guys. I don't know. I can't do it, John. All right.
No, that's perfect. You're a very good spooky John.
Yeah, I tried. Welcome to the Good Games Podcast. My name is Leo.
And my name is James.
We switched it up a little bit there.
Yeah, that was... I don't know what just happened.
Huh? Did it sound kind of like you?
Yeah. Should I just be you this episode and you be me?
No, that might be too difficult.
I have to speak with a very low, deep
I
voice.
I don't even know how I would begin to portray you. Like, I think I would be kind of a louder, more energetic Jerry Seinfeld.
Right. Yeah.
Nerdier, I guess too.
Yeah.
But I don't even know how to do that. It's just I can't even physically begin to try imitating you, James.
I just got to be a very low, deep, and
I'm easy.
Mm-hmm. Just very even voiced Leo. I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep that up though. I'm probably not going to keep that. No. There's no way.
We're back.
Hey.
That was a weird.
All
that
right.
was a Halloween Twilight Zone moment. Now we're back to normal.
Well, I'm going to play off your segue there. And because it is the month of October, we are contractually obliged to cover spooky things. And we're actually going to take... This is mostly... If this is, for some reason, your first episode of the Good Games podcast, we are normally a podcast. We are normally a podcast that covers video games. We are taking a 1-episode break to cover board games. Or maybe we're a podcast that just covers games, and sometimes we cover video games, and sometimes we cover board games. Most of the time we cover video games. Today we're talking about tabletop games, but they're spooky tabletop games, Leo. We're talking about the popular Betrayal at the House on the Hill.
Yes.
Ooh.
Spooky.
Yeah. It's very spooky.
I feel like it was just yesterday we pulled out the spooky thing.
What do you mean?
I guess it was last year.
Yeah, well, yeah. It's been a whole year.
Spooky episode, yeah.
Yeah. What did we do last year? Resident Evil, I think?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Good.
All right, well, here we are again, talking about spooky betrayal.
Good old spooky betrayal. That's what I call it.
Yeah.
So, this was like one of the first games I played. So, like, people who are like really into board games talk about gateway games.
Oh yeah.
Which are like, if you're really, really into board games and you're trying to get like other people into board games, like one of the obstacles you run into is you have to convince people that board games are more than just like Monopoly and like Trouble and Sorry and like all these like fucking shitty ass board games. You have to convince people that playing a board game is really fun.
Yeah. Right.
So you have these like what we call gateway games, which are usually not very complex. You just have like simple rules, and they're like easy to learn, easy to teach, easy to play, and still are a good time. Betrayal at the House on the Hill was my gateway game. This was like the first game I played, like I think when I was in college, and I played this and I was like, what the hell? Like, what board games are good?
Yeah.
I had such a good time with my first game of Betrayal. I think what drew me in was like the theming I liked the idea of like a Scooby-Doo haunted house where like any number of things could be in there, you know, Dracula or werewolves or zombies or aliens or, you know, whatever.
It's all
Any
part of the just the general theme, like of like. Is it? I mean, is betrayal kind of like? Does it fall under the H.P. Lovecraftian sort of horror stuff,
No,
or
I
is it just
don't
more
know.
general, like just general
Yeah.
horror
Yeah.
themes? Okay,
It's
okay,
I would call it Scooby Doo horror, and that
yeah.
there could literally be anything inside the
Anything
mansion.
going on?
Yeah,
Yeah.
literally anything.
I guess that's true.
Um,
Yeah,
I guess we should actually explain what, in the off chance that you haven't played this game, it is a very popular game. More so recently because I think Target has started the retail store Target has started stocking. Betrayal, and Target
yeah.
actually has a pretty decent selection of
They
board games
do.
now, which is good.
Yeah,
It's
they do.
good. But a lot more people I think are playing this because like you don't have to go to a hobby store to find Betrayal, or order it offline or something. You just walk into Target and people go, "Oh, what's this? Oh, board games are good." Like, which is
Yeah,
very good for the hobby.
of course.
Um, so Betrayal is a really weird board game. Betrayal is uh, a game where ostensibly you're exploring a haunted house, and it has an element of tile laying, right? So you start out in like the foyer of this mansion, and you can go in any direction, and you have this stack of tiles that is randomized. So every time you play your haunted mansion is going to look different. Maybe you go left out of the foyer and you find the kitchen, or maybe you go left out of the foyer and you find the ballroom, right? It's just because it's a randomized stack of tiles that you're drawing from.
Right.
And also about whatever halfway through the game, you're exploring rooms, you're finding items, you're events, spooky events happen while you're exploring the mansion.
Right.
One of these things is called picking up an omen, and if you have a certain number of omens, you have to roll dice. And anyway, a haunt, what they call the haunt, happens, and two things happen. First of all, you actually start playing a game because for the first
There's no
half of
objective at
Betrayal,
first, right?
yeah, there's really no objective other than just explore the house. You're just
Right.
kind of just exploring the house and trying to stock up on like supplies and
Right.
items. I guess.
Find items and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're kind of, it's a preparation phase.
Yeah. The second half, first of all, a board game starts in the second half of the game
Yeah.
because you actually get rules for like you get rules and a win condition,
Right.
and the win condition is different. It's different every single time because when the haunt starts, you have to flip to a certain page in a book that is dependent, and the page you have to flip to is determined by the room you're in when you picked up this omen that triggered the haunt and the omen itself. So there's two different factors that determine which page you flip to.
Mhm.
And the page has your rules. So like here's the rule set for how you win or lose, which is it turns it into usually it turns it into like a team-based game. So you have like a 1v4 or a 2v3, or like sometimes it's strictly cooperative. The rules and the win conditions are different every single time. And also, and this is why I say it's a Scooby-Doo haunted house, the villain, like the monsters in the house and the scenario are different every time, because like once you flip to this rule book to figure out what you're actually doing, the story that sets up the monsters and
It's really part of
what,
that scenario. Yeah.
yeah. It's part of the scenario. The scenario is introduced as different every time, hopefully, unless you've gotten the same scenario multiple times.
Which it can happen, but it's rare.
I was going to say, I've played this game enough times where I've played definitely a majority of the scenarios. I think
But
there's 50
let's
of
not
them.
forget. Let's not forget. Each scenario typically introduces one of the players that you've been playing with as the villain.
Which is why they call it
the betrayer. Yeah.
The betrayer, which is why they call it Betrayal at the House of His. There's usually at least one of you is the betrayer.
Yeah, usually. Sometimes it's like full co-op or something, right?
And sometimes. And you join league, or sometimes it's like every man for himself, whatever.
Right.
And the person who is the betrayer, if there is one, is like in league with the monsters and often gets to control the monsters and is trying to kill the remaining, what do they call them? Survivors, heroes? I can't remember what the terminology is.
Whatever.
And the other 3 or 4 people, depends on how many people you're playing with, are trying to stay alive and defeat all the monsters or escape the house or whatever the win condition
Whatever the
is.
win condition is, right? So let's pause there for a second, because
Yeah,
I
yeah,
gotta tell you that this game does two things that I, in playing this game, learned
yeah.
that I like very, very much in board games. And
Uh-huh.
like you said, it was almost an introduction to like, holy shit, board games can be really cool. Number
Uh-huh.
one, not introducing the win condition until well into the game. Apparently, I'm a big fan of that. Like,
Interesting.
it's kind of weird because you think most any game should have an objective from the very beginning,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
it
yeah.
almost adds this layer of mystery when you start out the game and you're still exploring and you're seeing certain like
Yeah.
hints at what could possibly be happening, or the
Yeah.
different items that you're getting are kind of random. But
Uh-huh.
and then the game starts, and it like I don't know. I like that sort of momentum of the game, that cadence of the
I
game.
kind of agree with you. It does sound weird if you haven't played this game, playing a game without a win condition, which is exactly what you're doing for the first half of this. But like I'm never bored. Like I'm always like, ooh, I
Yeah,
hope I get some good items or some cool events or something. Like
yeah.
it's never like, oh my god, hurry up, let's get to the second half, you know?
It's like any good meal starts with a good appetizer first.
Yeah, yes, the first half of this game is a very good appetizer.
Yeah. And then the second thing this game does that I turns out I love is when you have some way that you have players in a room, and
Mm-hmm.
the game has to come up with some mechanic to tell a small number of players in the room, typically one or two, that they
Mm-hmm.
are the bad person. And then
Yep.
they have to come back in that room and be the bad person in the same room as all the good people. Like
Yes.
like any game that does that apparently is one of my favorite games.
Yeah, yes. By the way, once the haunt starts, and if there is a betrayer, they get like a separate rule book and go to like a separate physical location.
Right.
Like if you have a different room in your house or like a bathroom or something, they like usually go in the bathroom and read the rule book and read what they're supposed to be doing,
Take a
while the
dump.
heroes read what they're supposed to be doing and like discuss their strategy and whatever.
Yeah.
And then after 10-15 minutes of debate and discussion, then you like come back and you have like a game plan for like, oh, the villain, or, the betrayer has got a game plan for how he's going to corner all the heroes, and the heroes have a game plan for how they're going to escape or whatever it is they're
Yeah.
trying to do.
It's like
So yeah,
you're all it's like you're always holding secrets from each other. So like when you
yeah,
first get back in that room together, that
hmm
like that kind of awkward wait in the room where like everyone
yeah,
knows that they know something he like the villain
hmm
doesn't know, and the villain knows something
hmm
they don't like. I love that. Like I just any game that can do that is apparently really, really fun for me.
I really like those like 15 minutes. If you're not the betrayer,
Yeah.
I really like those 15 minutes where you're like coming up with a game plan for like what you're going to
Yeah,
do.
that's fun.
Because like it's like, okay, you're gonna run to the attic and like grab the knife. I'm gonna like go to the basement and chant the spell of weakening or whatever, and then
Right.
like you're just gonna make a mad dash for the door or whatever. Like
Right.
I love that. It's like, and then it's like, okay, break, let's do this. Like
Yeah.
you know,
And then
it's
the fun part about Betrayal specifically is you'll make this whole plan with your party of non betrayers, and then the betrayer comes in and is like, "Oh, by the way, I control this glowing orb that can go into any room through walls and
yeah,
zap you."
yeah,
Like
and everyone's like,
and you're
what? This
"Ah,
is some
shit."
bullshit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it spoils the
yeah,
whole
yeah, yeah.
plan.
Yeah. You kind of have to guess, because like usually there's some thematic hints at what the villain can do, and you
Right,
kind of have to like guess at what the rules may be, because usually the villain doesn't tell you exactly what he can and can't do.
right.
You know? Yeah.
That's fun,
Yeah.
man. Like having that layer of, again, it's like it's a mystery. Like it's mystery.
Hmm.
It's like a Scooby Doo show. Like it's
Yeah.
mysterious the entire way through. First, it's like, oh, what's gonna happen, and then it's like, what's happening, and then it's like, what can the villain pull out of his sleeve? That's gonna trick us all.
Uh,
Yeah, it's great.
yeah. So, uh, as much as I like loved this game when I first played, this was like my first gateway game. I've grown to like I rarely ever play this game anymore
Yeah,
because this game can be amazing, right? This
right.
game can also be fucking terrible, because what happens So the thing we just described, where there's like 50 or 60 different scenarios that are in the base box, and they are all randomly triggered by you're in a random room with random items or whatever. The the board state is unknown to the scenario, right? So the scenario has like usually some pretty loose rules because it doesn't really know what the board state is. So like I've played games where it's like, okay, like I'm the, you know, I'm Dracula, and like I win if I get to my coffin, and then like the coffin is in the basement or whatever, and I have to get down to the basement. You guys have to stop me. But like the problem is sometimes Dracula can just start like one room away from the basement.
Yeah, it's kind of like
And
random the map, right?
exactly, because
Yeah.
the scenario doesn't know what the board looks like.
Mhm.
So it's like, okay, Dracula just moves one space and he's like, cool, I win. And everyone's like, oh,
Oh
well,
shit.
that sucks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
this kind of sucks. And
Yeah.
I've had a bunch of times playing this game where it's like the scenario works perfectly and like, you know, everything's spaced out kind of well. Like the house isn't spaced in such a way that people's starting positions are right next to their objectives, you know.
Right.
But I've also had like I've also had ones where it's like, okay, the heroes have to find the like whatever, the staff of judgment, and it's the monster's only weakness, right? But like the heroes, like nobody on the board has the staff of judgment, and it like you have to like just keep exploring rooms and
Until you
finding
find
new
it.
items.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, the staff of judgment was just on the bottom of the draw deck, and we just never got to it. Like,
That'd be the
oh, okay,
worst.
well,
Yeah.
fuck, yeah. Like that's the problem with this game is like it can be good, but because of what this game is, because it's like 50 different scenarios that are all randomly triggered by random things, and the scenarios can't possibly be aware of what the state of the board is. Like you can also have bullshit scenarios, and like I don't know, like I it's not worth it to for me to put this game on the table knowing that I might be playing a bullshit scenario, you know?
Yeah, and that's the risk that you take for sure.
Yeah.
And like I don't know, I'm kind of curious what you think is a way to solve that, or what have certain games maybe done better that, you know,
Well, I
to
wanted
expand on that.
to. So I think what 2 years ago, 3 years ago, Betrayal came out with its first expansion, which is Widow's Walk, right?
Yes, I've played it.
Something something Widow's Walk. And I
Hmm.
was like, cool. Like, all right, I can't wait to see all the new rules and like ways that they fixed the like wobbliness of the base game. No, they didn't. They didn't address any of it. All Widow's Walk is like more cards, more rooms, more tiles, and more scenarios. I'm like, that's not what this game needs. This game does not need more. It just needs like tighter. It doesn't need to expand. It needs to rein in a little bit some of the wobbliness, right? But like that's not what they were going for in the expansion. It was like, oh, like let's just make it bigger.
Yeah,
Like, oh
more.
no.
Yeah, more of the
Yeah,
same.
yeah.
Right. Well,
And I played a bunch of the expansion scenarios and didn't really like any of them either.
really. Oh
Yeah.
man, I think I can't recall if I actually played the expansion or if I just played like a second edition or something of Betrayal.
Yeah,
Where,
the one that's in Target right now, I think, is the second edition.
yeah, I want to say that I
Yeah.
ended up playing that, and so it was, I guess, the same game, but there were
Yeah.
some differences in it that I think maybe they tried to tweak some of the balancing of those
Mm.
weird scenarios and stuff. So that might be worth a look.
Well, they also came out with, I think last year, they came out with Betrayal at Baldur's Gate.
Oh, that's what
which
it was. That's what I played. Yeah.
you
I
played
remember.
Baldur's Gate?
That's what
Okay,
I
all
played,
right.
yeah.
I've never played Betrayal at Baldur's Gate, so I don't know what. Like, is it just the same game but different theme? Like, is it just the same game but like knights and zombies and dragons?
Yeah,
Like, is it
effectively,
like a
yeah.
scary castle? Okay.
But I think that they like I said, I think it's like it's very much the same game but with different characters and stuff. But then they also, I think, took some ideas from the second edition of Betrayal, where like I think there's just something slightly different about the mechanics of how the haunting was triggered
Uh-huh.
and stuff like that that kind of made it, I don't know, go more fluidly. That's just my take on it. And I only played it once or twice, but
Um But I think the most exciting thing, and I was hoping I would get a chance to try this before we recorded this episode, and maybe if I do get a chance to try this before I edit this episode, I'll just edit in a little snippet of me talking about it. But I got for my birthday,
Oh,
I got Betrayal Legacy,
oh,
um,
it's a legacy
which
one.
yeah, so if you've ever heard of any of the Legacy games by Rob Daviau, so like Pandemic Legacy is like probably one of the most popular ones. So he's Rob Daviau has made a whole bunch of Legacy. He's got like Risk Legacy, Pandemic Legacy. He had there's like a Battleship one that I forget what that one's called. Anyway,
Ooh, I would get
this
that.
is this is Betrayal Legacy. So it's kind of pivoting into like a campaign, which I think is really interesting. I don't know if this is going to solve any of the like inherent basic problems with Betrayal,
Right.
but I'm really interested to see what a campaign means, because I think there's a lot of cool space you can experiment with, because like if you've ever played like these legacy games, one of the hallmarks of the legacy games is like you have stickers and labels, and you take a pen out and you write on your cards and you write on your tiles, and like you permanently change them, and that's kind of just part of the game. Is uh, you're like making permanent changes to the thing. Anyway, I've looked at the rules for Betrayal Legacy. Like one of the cool things is like if you draw an item. Okay, first of all, let me say the premise of Betrayal Legacy is you encounter this spooky mansion, whatever, just like the base game.
Right.
But it's you the first time you encounter it is in like the 1600s, and every subsequent campaign is like 50 to 100 years later.
Oh,
So you play a family throughout the campaign,
gotcha.
and you're playing like the next generation of that family member,
Oh, I
like
like that.
the next generation. And so like now, like instead of 1650, now it's the 1700s, and you're playing so and so, whoever you were in the last campaign, you're playing that person's son.
All right.
Anyway, one of the cool things you can do is like when you draw an item in Betrayal Legacy, is you can say like, oh, this is my family heirloom. So it's like, oh, you draw an item that just says knife, but then you can mark down like, oh, this is like Leroy Johnson's knife,
Okay.
which is like because you get to name your character at the beginning of your campaign.
Right.
So like even if Leroy Johnson dies, or even if he survives or whatever, like
His knife still.
his knife is still in the deck. So like
Yeah.
2 or 3 games later, it's like, oh, holy shit, I found Leroy Johnson's knife in the basement. Like, remember Leroy Johnson when he got like impaled by Dracula? That was amazing. Anyway, like I like that.
That's cool.
But like also I'm pretty sure like so like different, like if you die in a room, you have to put like, this is so and so's ghost who now haunts this room. So you just end up with like a whole bunch of tiles that are just like haunted now. I'm pretty sure that's how it's going to work. That you in addition to permanently changing the items, you also permanently change the tiles on the board. And like also that has gameplay effects too. It's not just thematic. So when you draw Leroy Johnson's knife, if you're in the Johnson family several generations later, you get like a stat bonus.
Some stat bonuses. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
So like I don't know if it fixes any of the problems with Betrayal, but I like the ideas that it's hacking. I like the idea of playing a legacy version of Betrayal, like a campaign version of Betrayal. That sounds really interesting to me.
I mean,
like
for what it's worth, I think
Yeah.
Betrayal, like you said, I don't think that it's necessarily the first game that I would grab if I had some friends over who are
exactly, yeah,
well versed in the world of board gaming. But I think that if there's someone who maybe has never played it, I'm very quick to try to like run a game and introduce them to it.
Yeah.
I think despite its flaws, for the most part, it works really well.
Yeah.
So I would say, I think a legacy game might not fix the same problems it's always had, but that sounds awesome.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. Here's the one thing I obviously haven't played the game yet. Here's the one thing that I think kind of gets fixed. Kind of. If you have that bullshit scenario where it's like, oh, so and so is just like one square away from winning the game,
goal, right?
And it's just like, oh fuck, well that kind of sucks. that kind of gets woven into the narrative, like the larger narrative of your campaign. It was like, oh, hey, remember when the fucking Wolfman beat us in that one turn and like slaughtered us in one turn? Like that is now like a canon piece of
Gotcha.
story that is woven into your larger campaign, whereas that doesn't really happen in like the normal base game, because it's just, you know,
it's
the game just ends and
a siloed game, right? So maybe their plan here is, look, 8 out of 10 times Betrayal goes flawlessly. So our hope is that if we have a campaign of 10 games, you know, 80% of the time, the players will be very happy with how fair things were after the haunting.
Yeah, but those 2% just are like, I don't know. It's like a fun story you can tell now, as opposed to like a shitty story that happened that one time we tried to play this
part
shitty
of the grander
game.
tale now, instead of that one. Yeah. Well, I guess that's a good enough way to mitigate that feeling. But legacy games aren't necessarily for every group of people.
Oh no, you have to have like a regular play group that you can do multiple. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome,
no, I'm excited for this. I'm excited. I will edit in a little snippet here of how my playthrough went. Bleep. Hello, future James here. I did end up getting to play the first scenario of Betrayal Legacy. It was good. It doesn't really solve any of the problems with the base game of Betrayal at the House on the Hill, but the first scenario, at least the first scenario, controls the variables very tightly by having a very small tile set to start with and a very small item and event stack to start with. So it doesn't really fix the problems so much as it controls them. And I'm curious to see if we're going to keep these variables very tightly under control, because one of the hallmarks of a legacy game is you can also destroy components. So I'm wondering throughout this campaign if we're going to keep destroying some of the cards and tiles to keep the, you know, huge variability of this game in check. But anyway, it was very good. I don't want to spoil anything, but it's a very good first tutorial scenario, and I had a very good time with it. So yeah, Betrayal Legacy. It was good. Anyway, back to past James. Bleep. But yeah, any other thoughts on Betrayal at the House on the Hill?
It's good.
It is good. It is a good game. If you have someone who likes like a horror theme, this is a very lightweight game that you can explore just like a silly, spooky theme without a whole lot of like weight of rules complexity. It's a very easy game to teach.
Yes.
And, you know, yeah. So, what is our top 5? We're doing top 5 board games, right?
Yeah. Well, I think the official top 5 was tabletop games.
Tabletop games. Top 5 tabletop games.
Right.
So do you want to go through the top 5s like we normally did, where I go through and then you go through, or do we want to do a consensus?
I'm kind of in the mood to bring it back to the old way, just while it's the two of us.
Oh, all right, here we go.
I do have a full 5, and I figured you might as well.
Yeah. Oh, I also have a full 5. All right.
Let's do it.
Should I start?
Yeah.
My number 5 is a really wacky, intentionally imbalanced game of diplomacy and negotiation called Cosmic Encounter. Have you played this, Leo? Cosmic Encounter?
I have not played Cosmic Encounter.
This is a very good... It's not quite a party game, because like I think of party games like, you know, like Cards Against Humanity, or like Joking Hazard, or like Code Names, or something you can put down for a large group, and you know you don't have to explain a lot of rules. It just goes pretty easy.
Right.
This has, you know, it has a moderate level of rules complexity, and it only plays up to like 5 or 6 people or something like that. But like I think of it as like it's a good party game that also has a fair amount of strategy and complexity. Basically what you're doing in Cosmic Encounter is you're trying to score 5 points. So the way you score points in Cosmic Encounter is you have to invade somebody else's homeworld. So, oh, by the way, you're all alien races, and you're all there are. Oh God, I think in the base box for Cosmic Encounter, there's something like 50 or 60 different alien races. I have several of the Cosmic Encounter expansions, so I have like 100+ alien races.
Oh,
So basically, and each alien race has their own power. So basically you're sitting at a table and you have no idea what bullshit anyone can pull on you at the same time. Basically, what you're trying to do is invade somebody else's homeworld, and you have a hand of cards, and your cards mostly all have numbers 1 to 30. I think 30 is the biggest, maybe 50 is the biggest. I don't know. It's been a while since I played. And normally in an encounter, you both flip over cards simultaneously. The bigger number wins, and that's how you decide a fight. But you don't always have to fight in Cosmic Encounter. You can say, when you encounter somebody, you can say, "Hey, man, let's just be diplomatic about this. We can negotiate."
mm-hmm.
But in order to do that, you have to have a negotiation card in your hand, which is not rare, but not common either. But both players have to play this diplomacy card. They can negotiate, and maybe they can come to like a peaceful agreement on like, hey, I'll give you 1 point if you give me 1 point. The problem is, if somebody plays a diplomacy card and somebody plays a numbered card, even if it's a low number, like 1, 2, or 3, the number always wins. So you have to be sure nobody's going to stab you in the back. Anyway, and there's also these really wacky variable alien powers that can, some of the alien powers like invert the numbers. So like 1 is 10 and, 23 is 32, or like some of them are, they get really, really wacky, and you never know. I play the variant where you don't know what the other person's power is until they use it. Anyway, it's a really wacky, fun game of diplomatic negotiations and backstabbing. Cosmic Encounter is my number 5.
I do like backstabbing in my games, so that's
yeah.
sounds cool.
It's very fun.
My number 5 is, well, I didn't know if it really counted or not, so that's why I put it at number 5. It does technically take place on a tabletop, but we've talked about it many a times, especially when we talked about our top 5 favorite card games. Yeah. And I'm speaking, of course, of Magic the Gathering.
What? How is Magic only your 5?
I wanted to.
I figured that would be number 1 easy.
I wanted to like give other tabletop games an opportunity with this list. Like, I broadened the genre because like I don't just want to always have Magic the Gathering at the top of all my lists.
Okay.
So I'm calling that a card game. So as far as a tabletop game, it's only halfway part of that.
Okay.
So, because it has a digital aspect and everything. So,
So what makes Magic the Gathering good in 2019?
Oh man, it's just so good. Just trust me about it. It's a fantastic game. I mean, we've talked about it at length. Everyone knows, if they're still listening, that I'm an avid Magic fan. We don't have to say much more about it. PvP, collecting cards, building your own deck, fast-paced, instant spells. It's great.
Nice. All right. My number 4 is the Board Gamers board game, Twilight Imperium. This is a game... I don't think you've played this one either, Leo. This is a game that will literally take you 8, 9, 10 hours the first time you play it. No exaggeration.
Wow.
This game will take your entire day, especially if you're playing with an inexperienced group who doesn't know the rules.
Right.
This is the game I previously described, Cosmic Encounter. A round of Cosmic Encounter is like 10, 15 minutes maybe before somebody has 5 points.
Yeah, pretty fast.
This is pretty fast paced. This is Cosmic Encounter on steroids. This game takes our group is pretty fast now. We can get a game done in about 5 or 6 hours.
Jeez.
But this game is usually you play 5 or 6 players. There is still, just like Cosmic Encounter, I love that Twilight Imperium has an aspect of like negotiation and diplomacy. But also there's an element of backstabbing because you could be like, hey man, I'll set up a trade agreement with you where, you give me 3 of your trade goods, I'll give you 3 of my trade goods. And it's like, okay, cool. It's like, and then like the very next turn, the guy you just traded with like invades one of your planets and you're like, ah, God. But Twilight Imperium is, it looks like a hardcore board game because it's played on this huge grid of hexes where each hex represents a quadrant in the galaxy, and there are, just like Cosmic Encounter, there are, I think, 17 races in Twilight Imperium, each with their own variable powers and special abilities and strengths and weaknesses. So some races are really, really good at military, and their path to victory is going to be like, okay, I just got to take my strong military units and I just have to, bully my way to victory. I have to, invade everyone's planets and kill all their units. That's my path to victory. Some races are really good at economics. So I might be playing a race that's really good at generating resources or trading. I might be playing a race that's really good at science and technology. So, there's all these technologies you can research in TI, and you might, research a bunch of good technologies that give you either good position on the board, or the other thing that's cool about TI is the way you score points is based on a deck of cards that is randomized. Ooh. So you never know. Yeah, you never know. You'll have a certain amount of objectives, and you'll never know what those objectives are until you start playing the game.
I gotta tell you, anytime you add a deck of cards into a tabletop game, you got my attention.
There are many, many decks of cards in Twilight Imperium. There's a deck of cards for objectives. There's a deck of cards for what they call tactic cards, which are basically like fuck you cards. They're just like little cards that say like, oh, hey, there was a reactor meltdown on your planet and 3 of your people died. Sorry. Like, and you're just like, oh, fuck you. There's a card of agendas because at a certain phase in Twilight Imperium, you all have to sit on, basically, you have to sit around the Galactic Senate from the Star Wars prequels and agree on what galactic laws should be. So there will be like a Speaker of the House that nominates a law, and everyone has to vote on whether or not this should be a law or if we should vote against it. There's a deck of cards that is your technology deck that you can research. There's all sorts of decks of cards.
This game sounds really complicated.
It is incredible. This is the heaviest, most complex game on my list, and it will, no lie, if you have not played this game before, it will take you 10 plus hours, the majority of your day from sun up to sundown.
You enjoyed it though? Like, you enjoyed playing this game?
I will honestly tell you, the first 2 or 3 times I played this game, I actually did not enjoy it because there is so much buildup, and like you get backstabbed so many times over the course of like 7, 8, 9 hours. You're just like, oh fuck. Like,
yeah.
However, I played this game probably close to 10 times now.
Wow.
Which is a lot for an 8-hour game.
100 hours of your life.
Yeah, basically. I'll say this. We've established like a regular play group, and we have our play time down to like 4 or 5 hours. So you don't have like quite as much invested in it. Like, you've only spent like 2 or 3 hours building up your awesome race, as opposed to like 6 hours, right. Which like 6 hours is like most of the day, and when like somebody comes in and destroys what you've been working on for 6 hours, you're just like, fuck you. Like, or with this, it's just like, oh, fuck you,
Yeah. So it's slightly less fuck.
Yeah,
that's good.
But also, I don't know, I've just learned there's a lot of complexity in this, and you there's a lot you can sink your teeth into if you want to get like serious about this game, like learning how the different races play and like the meta on like what each race should be doing on every turn. Anyway, wow. It's a ridiculous game. Okay. Twilight Imperium.
All right, I'll have to avoid that one.
Next time you're down, I'm forcing you to waste an entire day playing this with us.
All right, I'll be sure to only come over for like an hour. Okay, so my number 4 is another card game. This is the last card game of my my list here. But I feel like it's worth mentioning as a classic tabletop game. You mentioned it earlier. It's more of a
What
party.
card game is above Magic?
Well, again, this is tabletop category, so this is different. This is more of a party game that you would all play around the tabletop. It's a multiplayer thing.
Yeah.
It's Cards Against Humanity.
Nice. Yeah.
Just kind
classic
of a
party game.
Classic party game, tabletop fun. It's. I think what I love about it is that it's very offensive, and sometimes I'm very offensive, and I fully accept offensive things. So I think the most fun I've had playing Cards Against Humanity is playing with people who don't like being offensive. Anytime you get to play Cards Against Humanity and someone, well, let me talk about real quick, like if you've never played, if you've been living under a rock and you've never played cards. It is basically a game in which you try to get points by getting the chosen reader of the cards to vote for your combination of cards. Everyone gets a hand of, I forget how many white cards that just have like a phrase on it. And then the reader takes one black card off of the community pile that has some sort of blank or, saying something where everyone chooses the white card that goes with the black card, and basically the reader reads them all out, and then just it's apples to apples if you've ever played it, but it's for adults.
I was just about to say it is pretty much apples to apples, but filthy.
Right? And that's inherently one of the problems with this game is I don't think like the base game by itself has a whole lot of replayability. It's like the whole premise of the game is like these cards are shocking and they're fun in the combinations that are created, but they're also like, once you play it like 2 or 3 times, you've seen them all. And so that's why I think the company has come out with just countless numbers of expansions and
oh my god.
There's so
I
many.
tried to keep up for a while. Like I have the bigger, blacker box, and I had like all the numbered one, and then it just got ridiculous. They come out with like every year they come out with a ridiculous promotion where they started digging a hole to China. They bought a piece of land in Texas to prevent the wall being built.
The company has done lots of really interesting things.
Just these absurd things.
There was a Christmas marketing campaign.
There was a Hanukkah one too, I'm pretty sure.
But I think that was funny because the Christmas one, like people paid like a bunch of money for like an empty box or something. I don't remember.
Anyway, and usually those are also come with a deck of cards. But I have so many. I'm looking at my collection right now. I have so many cards that like I have more cards than you could ever play, and there's still so many expansions that I don't even have.
Well, I mean,
it's gotten a little ridiculous.
That makes it so that you can always pick up a brand new expansion you've never played with, get a bunch of new cards you haven't seen, and maybe go back and play a little Cards Against Humanity with some of the new stuff.
Exactly. That game is a collector completionist's nightmare.
I would not recommend it for collecting.
My number 3 is my after you've played Betrayal and you've been disappointed by too many bullshit scenarios, my number 3 is my recommendation for where to go after Betrayal at the House on the Hill, and that is Mansions of Madness. This is definitely an H.P. Lovecraft, Cthulhu themed game.
Yes.
It is also, interestingly, an app-driven game. So in order to play this game, you'll either need a smartphone, a tablet, a computer, something to run this app with. Because basically in Betrayal, you can explore in any direction, whatever, and just start laying tiles down. And usually what happens is you end up with a house that makes no fucking sense, first of all. Structurally it makes no sense, because you'll just have these huge sprawling pathways out into nowhere. But in Mansions of Madness, when you explore into a new room, the app will tell you the exact tile to lay down, and this is kind of the solution if you don't like the wobbliness of Betrayal.
Yeah. I was going to say this earlier, but I was going to wait for our top 5 because this is mine as well.
Yeah. Mansions of Madness is to a pretty good extent, aware of the board
Yeah.
state. So like, and all of the scenarios are pre-generated. So when you click a scenario that you want to play, the rules are already in there. Like there's no, there's no randomness. There's no randomness to the
To what, to like
whatever the
the haunting,
variables.
or the
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like
It's all
it's as if you've played Betrayal without the randomness of which event occurs
mhm,
halfway through. It already knows which
exactly.
event is going to
Yeah.
occur halfway through the game.
Yeah, there is no randomness to the
Right.
variables. All the variables are all pre-programmed and all that stuff. Mostly, there is some randomness for
Yeah.
sure. But anyway, it's Betrayal. If Betrayal was not random,
Not
uh,
as random.
the right, yeah. The one thing is, Mansions is almost always a strictly cooperative
Mhm.
game. So if you like the one versus many aspect of Betrayal, maybe Mansions is not the game for you. But uh, in most scenarios, you're strictly cooperating with everyone else at the table, unless somebody goes insane. Which I love the way they handle insanity in Mansions of
Right.
Madness, because you have insanity cards, a deck of insanity cards, and they have you're dealt a new win condition, which is sometimes an additional win condition, but it's sometimes a brand new win condition that you're not allowed to tell anyone else at the table. So basically, for all intents and purposes, you just start behaving erratically, and you can't explain to anyone else why you're behaving erratically, which is like a perfect, like, I don't know, if you're trying to thematically capture
Yeah, that captures
insanity, that's
madness, right?
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're just like, oh god, you can't trust Leo anymore. He's just, he's running around the house and picking up random items and dumping them in the
Yeah.
attic. And you're just like, I have no idea
is
what
he
he's trying to
doing?
do.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Well, it's
yeah,
always
no idea
safe
if we can
not to
trust
trust
him or
me
not.
in
Yeah.
general. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Mansions of
That's a great choice.
Madness. It's
I love that
good.
game, actually. Um,
It is good.
so my number 3 is going way back to the classic
Whoa.
tabletop game, the one that you could say really
Yep.
started it all in terms of
Yeah.
nerdy tabletop games. I'm speaking, of course, of Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say chess.
Well, no, chess. Yeah, I guess chess could be a tabletop game, but
Yeah.
I mean, that's not really so nerdy. D and
No,
D.
it's not nerdy, but
Yeah.
you're the one that started it all.
No,
It
well,
was-
well, what?
how can you get any more classic than chess?
Well, what I mean by started it all, I'm talking about started the nerdy
Yeah.
board games,
Yes.
right?
Absolutely.
Because I feel
Yeah.
I feel like before D&D, we had different types of board games for chess, or I don't know, checkers, and I don't know, Monopoly or whatever. But D&D, I think, took this concept of um, J.R.R. Tolkien's fantasy world, and then applied these like statistic based stats or whatever, strength and dexterity or whatever, to you, the player. And then you all just went around and created your own board game, and Betrayal, or actually more, Mansions of Madness actually is a little bit like D&D in that you have a dungeon master who's kind of guiding the game, but in Mansions of Madness, of course, it's an app that's the dungeon master.
Right.
So with D&D, it's another player, so there's a little bit more creativity in what could happen, a little bit more randomness in terms of like they don't always know what the best answer is, or they might be missing some information, or have messed something up when they were planning the game, and so some crazier things can happen. But on the flip side is it's also a little bit more sort of in your head. Typically people will bring like a map and some miniatures maybe or something, but it is kind of a little bit more free and modular game. I had never really played D&D until recently, actually. I think earlier this year or late last year.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I played D&D 5th edition, which is a lot more, I think, casual friendly. So that's specifically the edition I would recommend for people to check out.
Nice.
Yeah.
Excellent. Classic D&D. My number 2 is a game that is licensed from one of my favorite movies, which is Star Wars Rebellion. It is also based on a classic 1997 PC game, also called Star Wars Rebellion. The PC game is like really weird, and it's the type of game that could only exist in 1997. It's this very long. It it's like to play one game of PC 1997 PC Rebellion is like, I don't know. The game takes like 7, 8, 9, 10 hours. It's like a game of TI, right?
Right.
It's like, but you're only playing like one campaign, and it tried to like thematically capture the entire Star Wars trilogy from like, because there's like all these planets, and you know you're trying to conquer all the planets, but like you also have all the characters like Luke and Leia, and then
Just
like,
floating
you
around
know,
somewhere.
yeah. So like there's like these things where like, oh, you know, Luke has to go rescue Han from Jabba the Hutt or something like that, and you're like, oh well, I needed Luke to go on this other mission, you know, that sort of thing. Anyway, Star Wars Rebellion, the board game, is attempting to capture what made the PC game interesting. I wouldn't say good, because I don't think the PC game is actually that good, but kind of what made that game interesting, which is this weird asymmetric battle between the Star Wars rebels, the Rebel Alliance, and the Galactic Empire. So, and for the record, this is my number 2 favorite board game of all time. The board game is way better than the PC game because, first of all, it's shorter. You can get the board game done in like 2 hours. And second of all, you can play it against somebody else. So, like, that's cool. Where I think you could do it in the PC game, but most of the time in the PC game, you're playing against the computer. But also, the board game is way more balanced. Even though it's completely asymmetrical, it's still pretty balanced. I've played no fucking joke. I've played probably between 30 and 40 games of Star Wars Rebellion, and it's been split pretty evenly between Empire and Rebellion. And at this point, me and my friend I play this with all the time, we are pretty fucking deep in the meta of Star Wars Rebellion.
Right.
Like, we've exploited everything there is to exploit. We know all the rules. We know all the ins and outs. And I'd say it's pretty fucking balanced. But basically, at the beginning of the game, the Empire has control of all these planets and has this huge board state advantage, right? They have all these, you know, Star Destroyers and you know, ATs and Stormtroopers and just legions of troops, right? And the Rebellion doesn't have that. They have like just a handful of ships and some dudes a little bit. You know, they might have control of one planet, but they have the secret rebel base, right? And the Empire that has all the big armies, their win condition is they have to find and destroy the secret rebel base.
But it's secret.
Yes, but it's secret. So they have no idea where on this huge map of sprawling planets, and this is the same win condition from the PC version, by the way, for the Empire. They have no idea where in the galaxy the secret base is. But the thing that made it bullshit in the PC version is all the Rebellion had to do was take Coruscant. Whereas in the, because like it's so easy, there's just one planet, you just have to go take this one planet.
Like that was the win
Empire
condition
for the Rebellion, whereas the Empire has the same win condition. They have one planet, but they have no idea where in the galaxy it is, so it could be any, you know. And the rebels can move it whenever they want, so it was like way harder to play as the Empire. Anyway, the way they balanced this in the board game is there's a ticking timer. So basically, if you don't do anything, I think it's like 14 rounds. After like 14 rounds or something like that, the Rebellion automatically wins. But they can push the timer up faster by completing secret objectives. And their secret objective might be like, you know, you have to go sabotage 3 of the Empire's home planets, and you have to send, in order to accomplish like sabotage missions, you have to send from some of the like Rebel Alliance heroes, you know, Han Solo, Chewbacca, Luke Skywalker, Leia, whatever, on these missions to go try to sabotage the planets. But the Empire is trying to foil you at the same time, so they have Darth Vader, the Emperor, you know, all the famous names from the movies and all that stuff. So you're sending your heroes on to accomplish these secret objectives, and the Empire is trying to thwart you. Well, at the same time, they're trying to figure out where your base is. It's a really fun strategy game. Very, very fun strategy game. because like at the end of it, it's almost always like, oh, I had no idea where the hell you were. Like, oh, I was on Tatooine. Like, oh, you were on Tatooine. Like, oh man, that was the one place I didn't check. You know,
Right.
like you end up with those sort of things a lot. Or it's like, just because of the hidden information of the rebel base creates a lot of like tension throughout the whole game. It's very good.
I feel like though
Star Wars,
you're not getting the most out of that game unless you are dressing up as your favorite Star Wars characters while you play.
Got it. Yeah, I've never done that. Is one thing I've not done. Dressed up. I've played this game 30 or 40 times. I've never dressed up as my favorite Star Wars character while I played it.
Throw the cloak and hood on and be like,
yeah,
execute Order 66.
Yeah. It's a very good asymmetrical strategy game. Star Wars Rebellion.
Cool. My number 2 is coming back to your number 3, James. Whoa! Mansions of Madness.
It's really good.
But since you took Mansions of Madness and I had a slash on the end of it, I'm going to go ahead and talk about Lord of the Rings Journey to Middle-earth.
Oh, this is, I really want to hear about this. So, I've not played it, and yeah.
If you liked Mansions of Madness, boy, oh boy, let me tell you about Lord of the Rings Journeys to Middle-earth, because it is arguably the better Mansions of Madness.
Why is it better?
Everything you like about it, but better. First of all, I gotta say I am a big Lord of the Rings fan, so take this with a grain of salt. I'm sure that's part of the reason why I really enjoy it.
Am I still gonna like this game if I don't like Lord of the Rings?
Yes, because it's still just in a nutshell the same sort of game mechanics as Mansion of Madness. I don't really like H.P. Lovecraftian madness horror, but I like the mechanics of Mansions of Madness enough to buy the game. Yep. So in a similar vein, Lord of the Rings still has a lot of the same mechanics. There's still an app that runs the game for you. Yep. There's still these randomized tiles that you place according to how the game directs you. You have characters with stats, and you have skill tests, and then there's some sort of enemy movement that the app controls, and then some sort of major event or objective that gets introduced later on in the game, which of course I always like. But everything is thematically Lord of the Rings. So you play one of in the base game, it just came out recently, so I'm sure there's going to be more classic characters as they produce expansions, but you can play one of 6 characters: Aragorn, Gimli, Legolas, Bilbo randomly, and then 2 characters, Elena and Boromir, who are actually, I found out, fictional. Like, they're not canonical Lord of the Rings characters, but there are just a couple extra female characters that they introduced in another board game, like in 2011 or something, 2013. So they brought over some of these,
probably Lord of the Rings, the card game, or something
like
probably.
that. I don't know. I forget what it was. But basically, these are some female characters that I don't know if it's just Fantasy Flight Games that came up with them or what. But they're in there just to have some more female characters, I guess, because Lord of the Rings is kind of a sausage fest. Right. So we play one of those 6 characters. Now, here's the differences that I've found, and I've really enjoyed.
Okay, here we go. Yep.
Number 1, and the biggest difference between Journeys to Middle-earth and Mansions of Madness, and you put a deck of cards in the game, and I'm more inclined to like it. They removed the dice.
Oh,
so there's no longer a dice roll for your skill tests. In Mansions of Madness, you would roll X amount of dice depending on which stat you were testing. Instead, in Journeys to Middle-earth, each player, each character chooses a role. Typically, the roles match the characters. Like Bilbo is like the smuggler or stealth rogue or whatever, and Aragorn is the captain, and Legolas is the hunter, and Gimli is the guardian. But your roles don't have to. You can choose a different role for each character if you like. But basically, your role that you choose and your character, along with some cards that everybody gets, makes up a deck. And like any other typical deck building game, you put your deck in a pile, you shuffle it up, and you start. You like have like a starting hand sort of, and then when you were to have a skill test, let's say you try to lift a rock out of the way and it requires a strength check, and your character has 3 strength, you draw 3 cards from the top of your deck, and then each card has the success or the like the currency mechanics, like you can turn it into a success if you spend the currency, right? In Mansions, that's
Yep.
clues. In this game, it's influence.
Yep.
So each card has that printed on the left side. So if you draw 3 cards and 2 of them are the success icon on the left, you've passed the strength test. And then alternatively, these cards also function as like, so they have text on them that you ignore during the skill tests, but
Right.
otherwise, if you were to play the cards like normally, there's a certain mechanic called scouting where you just look at 2 cards, then you look at the text of the card and you can put that like in your inventory, and it gives you some sort of stat boost, or when you were to do this type of test, you can discard this card to turn your things into successes, or whatever. So the whole skill testing and mechanics and everything is built into like a deck game rather than dice rolling, which is really, really fun.
Interesting.
And then there's a couple of quality of life things, like in Mansions of Madness, I think you have to spend an action to explore, right? Like the next room, you would have to like spend an action to open the door, and then it tells you what tile to put in next and what things might be in that room. In Lord of the Rings, you don't have to spend an action to explore. So it frees you up because you only have 2 actions per turn. So you can choose to move into a new tile. It automatically gets explored. You usually get some sort of like your clue, the equivalent of a clue token for exploring. And then it tells you what's on that tile, but you still have an action to do. So you can move again, or attack, or interact with something, or whatever.
Interesting.
So there's a couple little tweaks like that. And I think the app is just overall, they took some things they learned from the Mansions app and tweaked some things and polished some things. And it's, to me, it's just the better Mansions of Madness in every way.
It's very interesting that the way they use cards is very similar to Arkham Horror, the card game, which is, again, back in the H.P. Lovecraft universe. But yeah, the way you were describing that sounds like exactly the same thing as Arkham Horror, the
I'm
card
a big
game.
fan of it. I like that. And let me say this, the models, this might be the first miniatures I actually paint. I've never painted miniatures before.
Ooh,
because they are superbly detailed.
Yes. Yeah.
So you get some
Fantasy Flight's pretty good with their miniatures.
Yeah.
And speaking of Fantasy Flight, my number 1 is Android Netrunner, which I've talked about Netrunner a lot. But that makes a clean sweep of all 5 of my games being Fantasy Flight games.
Really?
I don't know. Yes, all of them. Cosmic Encounter, Twilight Imperium, Mansions of Madness,
not gonna lie.
Star Wars Rebellion, and Android. They make fantastic board games. They make a lot of good games. I don't know what to say. They make a lot of games I really like Android Netrunner. Another thing I'm realizing, I'll give a quick, this is probably the 3rd or 4th time I've explained Netrunner on this podcast. It's an asymmetric card game where one person is a hacker, one person is playing as a hacker, and the other is playing as a corporation. So basically, the hacker is trying to hack into the corporation's servers and steal their private data, and the corporation is trying to put firewalls up to keep the hacker out. So by nature, it's a asymmetric game, but because somebody's hacking and the other one's trying to protect, the corporation wins if basically they can keep the information in their servers a certain number of turns without the hacker stealing it. They get to score some points. And if the hacker gets in and gets that information, they get the points instead. So, Android Netrunner, it's a game about hacking. And the other thing I'm realizing is so many of the games in my top 5 have asymmetry.
I was just about to say that. You said asymmetrical cards.
Cosmic Encounter, Twilight Imperium, Star Wars Rebellion, and Android Netrunner are all asymmetrical games. And I wonder...
You like asymmetry?
I do, because fighting games are some of my favorite video games, which by their nature, all fighting games are asymmetrical. I wonder if it's just I don't know, there's just part of my brain that enjoys the asymmetry and enjoys thinking about this character or this race or this person, whatever, has this skill that interacts really well with this strategy or whatever. I just enjoy thinking about... or how to counteract somebody else's strategy. This character is really good, but he's got some weaknesses, this race is really good, but they've got weaknesses here that you can exploit. I enjoy thinking about the asymmetry a lot, I think. What's your number one, man?
All right, my number one. Um, okay, so I don't know how the best way to say this. I'm just gonna give
I have
one of the
no idea.
games.
By the way, I have no idea what this is. I don't.
Okay, you're okay. So all right, I'm gonna just pick one game. Okay, but it's really hard to pick one game. It's really this
uh,
whole genre that I like. But I'm gonna go
yep.
with the first one I ever played, and it's called The Resistance.
Ooh, yeah.
Okay,
Social deduction games. Yeah.
social deduction games is really what I would
Yep.
say because
Yep.
every single one I've played I've enjoyed. But Resistance was the first, and I think just the one that was like the easiest to pick up. Um, I think there's been some other ones that I think are pretty casual friendly, like Werewolf maybe or
Oh,
something.
I love One Night Ultimate Werewolf. That's my
Yeah.
favorite social deduction game. Oh,
Okay.
love
I've not
that.
played that one actually, so I might maybe it would change if I had played that. But
Uh huh.
if you haven't played a social deduction game, it's fantastic. It's my favorite type of tabletop game at this point in my life.
Have you
Basically,
played Blood on the Clock Tower?
no.
I really want to play that. That looks very interesting.
I'm interested. You
Anyway,
have me. You
yeah.
have my attention. So, like I said earlier, two of my favorite things are when either you have some objective that doesn't show up until later in the game, as Mentions Madness does. So that's why it's my number two. But my number one thing is when you have people in the room that know they are the bad guys, as the same room as people who are the good
Mm-hmm,
guys. I just
mm-hmm.
love that tension and the fact that you can't trust what anyone's saying, and some people are just really good liars and like you just never trust them, and then you finally do, and then you find out that you were right not to trust them because they're assholes and they were a spy the whole time. uh, and that's the kind of thing that happens in Resistance. It's you know the 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 whole point of the game is just that there's a spy, right? Everyone like
Mm-hmm.
there's like one spy in a group of five people, and you have to figure out who the spy is effectively.
There's someone in the room who is not who they say they are, and who
Right.
is it?
And the game
Yeah.
tries to get you to figure that out by having people vote on missions, and everyone puts these vote tokens in kind of face down and maybe mix them around or something. I don't remember. And somewhere in the vote, like if there's like a no vote, you know that the spy was in that group of voters, you know. And so you work through the
Mm-hmm.
rounds
Mm-hmm.
of voting to try to narrow down who it is. And if the good guys figure out who the bad guy is in time, the good guys win. And if they don't, the bad guys win. And then there's all these other like, so the thing is like there's the Resistance, and then there's like Avalon, which added like the Merlin character who knows who the bad guy is but can't tell it outright to the good guys or something. And like there's all these
Yes,
other,
I love Avalon for Resistance. I will not play Resistance without Merlin.
yeah, so all these other games have added all these other sort of characters that like know a lot and stuff on the side that tweak all the information that's handed around. I don't know, I love all these social deduction games. I'm a big fan of like awkward situations, and those games lead to a lot of those.
Yeah, good list. So that was uh should we repeat them? Like, so I had Cosmic Encounter, Twilight Imperium, Mansions of Madness, Star Wars Rebellion, and Android Netrunner. What were your top five?
My top five were Magic the Gathering, Cards Against Humanity, Dungeons and Dragons. I'm going to go Lord of the Rings, Journeys in Middle Earth, and Resistance.
Nice. Good list of good
For
games.
sure.
Should we endorse?
Yeah, why not?
All right. Well, I guess I can endorse. I don't know exactly what it is I'm endorsing, but I finished. So okay, let me start out with this. I like to watch a lot of movies, and I like to find certain creative voices or creative people in the movie industry, like certain directors that I really like.
Right.
And maybe 2 or so years ago, I watched basically the entire filmography of Stanley Kubrick. So 2001: A Space
That's a
Odyssey.
great movie.
It is a great movie. Full Metal Jacket, Eyes Wide Shut, Clockwork Orange, and The Shining. And I've seen The Shining before, and I watched it again. And my wife was like, "Hey," she's getting really into Stephen King, and she was like, "Hey, do you want to read The Shining?"
Hmm.
I was like, no, not really, but I mean, we could get an audiobook, so whatever. We listened to the audiobook on the way to work, and it was really entertaining. It was a very good audiobook. Um, and I don't know that that's necessarily what I'm endorsing, but like the audiobook's fine. It wasn't amazing. It was fine. But the cool thing was rewatching this movie. I don't know, I've seen The Shining probably 10 or 15 times. Rewatching The Shining after having listened to the audiobook was like eye opening. Like it was like seeing a completely new movie.
Really?
Because you have all the context of like all the things that happen in the book and like all the characters and all their backgrounds and everything, which is never gone into in the movie at all.
Right.
Yeah, it was like a really cool experience watching that movie with fresh eyes after reading the book. So I guess what I'm endorsing is read a book that has a corresponding movie and then watch the movie, I guess.
I always do
and then
that.
compare the differences, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, the unique situation I was in is like I had already seen this movie 15 times and then read the book for the first time and then went back and watched the movie with fresh eyes. But anyway. Yeah. The Shining bookend movie, or maybe more generically, just read a book that has a corresponding movie and then go watch that movie.
You know what's funny is
compare.
I've never actually sat and watched The Shining like all the way through.
Oh, it's a good movie that is a very weird and freaky movie. It's not because like people always talk about, oh, it's the scariest movie of all time or whatever, and like The Shining is almost always on those types of lists. Right. It's not because like modern horror movies in the past like 10 20 30 years will have like, you know, lots and lots of jump scares and like there is a clear danger in these types of movies, right? In like modern horror movies. The thing that makes The Shining, I think, scary is like, first of all, there's almost no jump scares in The Shining. Like the thing that makes it scary are like
the weirdness.
It's that like
that's actually scarier to me.
It's like something like I love in The Shining, the movie Room 237, because you know that something is terribly wrong in Room 237, but it just looks like any other room. It just looks like any other room, but you know it's wrong.
No, that's creepy. I don't like that. That's worse.
Yeah, the thing that makes The Shining scary is like you don't know what is scary. Like it's you can't immediately recognize what the threat of scary is in The Shining. There is not just one. I mean, obviously Jack Nicholson goes crazy and kills his family, but like there's so much of that. Yeah. There's so much of the movie that is like, you know, just abstracted. Like, what is scary here? Is it ghosts? Is there like some force that's driving these characters to do these things? Like, they keep having these visions. Like, where are these visions coming from? You know, it's an abstract scary, and I think that is what makes the movie scary. The abstract feeling of being afraid.
Yeah. Wow, that's deep.
That's The Shining. Yeah. There you go.
Okay. Well, now that I'm rightfully creeped out, I'm going to turn this back to a fun thematic conversation. Let's go back to the talk about board games for my.
Hey, there you go.
This was, I guess, an honorable mention, but I just kind of wanted to throw it in my endorsements because it's kind of a weird choice for. It's not really a tabletop game. I'm talking of a game I kickstarted. I backed on Kickstarter called Throw Burrito.
What the hell?
You have not heard of this game?
No.
Oh, this game is fantastic. The game is called Throw Burrito. It's from the creators of Exploding Kittens, the card game.
Okay. Cool, yeah.
So it is a card game plus dodgeball.
Good.
And if you could imagine those two things together in your head, it's probably exactly like that.
Good.
The game comes with 2 plush little soft cartoon burritos. They fit snugly in your hand. And then it's a card game in which you play with 3 or 4 people around a table and try to make matches. They're like the cards in the deck are like animals or something, and you have to match like 3 of the same card and slap them down, and then that's like a point. But then some of the matches you can make are, instead of like animals, they are types of burrito fights. So there might be a burrito
Amazing.
duel, or a burrito war, or burrito brawl. And there's slightly different dodgeball rules, but effectively, once someone plays a burrito match, some sort of burrito fight, everything stops. People rush for the burritos in the center of the table, and it turns into a game of dodgeball. And the first person to lose gets like a negative score to their overall score. And you basically just keep going until all the little negative scores are handed out. And then whoever has the highest score number of matches and scores without getting, without like adding in the minuses from the dodgeball game, wins. So it's like a weird thing where it's kind of a really hectic. The first time I played it with the backer version, you got actually 2 copies of the game. And so we had 4 burritos, like 7 dudes. I was playing with some kids ranging from middle school to high school, and some adults as well. And dude, it was like just absolute mayhem. Like there was burritos flying everywhere. There was cards everywhere. There was running around. People were sweating. Someone like ran like half a mile away to dodge a burrito. Like didn't want to get hit. Like it was just a lot of fun. So
That sounds amazing.
I think you can probably get it in stores soon. I know it went out to backers a little early, and I'm sure you can expect it in your typical distribution places soon.
That sounds incredible.
It's,
What a very unique board game.
Yeah.
All right, so next episode, are we going to be good for Final Fantasy VIII, the eighth one?
I think so. I'm reaching about halfway through. As far as I recall.
I'm close to the end now.
Yeah,
I'll be ready.
I'll amp it up in the next couple weeks here.
All right.
And get it done. No word from John on how much he's played.
Well, it might just be another 2-person episode next week. Maybe we'll see.
Maybe. I'm more inclined to
anyway.
have John in, and then we'll just talk about it and make him very confused.
Yes, and then ask him to explain it back to us.
Yeah,
because I can barely explain that game, and I've played it. It's a weird game. Anyway, more on that next episode.
All right.
But for now, for the Good Games podcast, my name is James.
I'm Leo.
And we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
But my favorite thing is when someone who's like, Susie, from church comes over and like, let's play a fun game together. And you're like, all right, Susie, have you ever played Cards Against Humanity? And she's like, no. And then,
what's this?
And then the first time she picks up the card, it just says like, I don't know, what's one of the worst?
Jerking off into a pool of children's tears.
Or
oh
right?
No!
Yeah, and then you just try to get her to like read the card, and she's probably like cracking up and can't even. I can't say this. I can't even read this. I can't. That's just the most fun to me. Just trying to get people just to like let down their walls and just read this ridiculous shit.
One of the most fun times I've had playing with you was with it was with you. Yeah. It was with you and your wife and a couple of other people that I knew, and also a bunch of people that I didn't know at all. It was like the first time I'd ever met them.
Yeah, that's the best.
And I've played Cards Against Humanity so many times now that I'm familiar with all the cards and what they say.
Right.
And I realized that like I was reading off all these like very taboo, shocking things,
right,
as though they were just nonchalant. It was like like eating someone's ass, okay, whatever. Like, jerking off into a pool of children's tears, okay, ha ha ha. Like, I'm like, oh, you guys don't, you guys don't know what these say.
Yeah, every time they're freaking out, and you're like, oh, sorry.
Yeah, they're like, oh my god, and I'm like, oh, sorry, I'm being very casual about this.
Right. Just wanted to go over real quick some of my favorites. I have them saved here. Here we go. I have a photo album of some of my favorite Cards Against Humanity.
Oh, here we go.
This one was. If you can't handle blank, you'd better stay away from blank. That was the black card.
Yep.
So the winning white cards were, if you can't handle actually getting shot for real, you'd better stay away from the Virginia Tech massacre. That's pretty good.
Oh god, yeah, that's good.
For
That's
my
good.
next trick, I
On
will pull
point.
blank out of blank. The winning
Yeah, here
cards
we
were
go.
for my next trick. I will pull dead parents out of Auschwitz. That's just classic,
Oh,
classic.
oh,
Just
oh no,
filthy kind of stuff you'll see in Cards Against Humanity.
no.
So, yeah, it's all good fun.